Dear students, welcome. The topic of today's lecture is questionnaire. Questionnaires form an important method of data collection. A questionnaire is the main means of collecting quantitative primary data. It usually forms an integral part of descriptive and opinion related surveys. In every socio-economic survey, the questionnaire plays an important role as a primary tool for the collection of data and required information. Questionnaire has been used for collection of personal preferences, social beliefs, attitudes, opinions, behaviors, patterns, group practices, habits, and other kinds of data. Questionnaire is equally used in survey research, experiments, and other modes of observation. Indeed, people ask different questions in their daily life to satisfy their queries. Journalists, market researchers, observers, and interested persons in different events ask a set of questions to others. They form an opinion or conclusion according to the answers they receive. The use of questionnaire or a set of questions is similar process in the research. The research questions are firmly constructed to receive answers related to the chosen variables for analysis. In fact, it may be treated as the heart of survey operations, as in practice, many such operations failed due to ill-drafted questionnaire. It has been rightly pointed out that the formulation of a good questions is much more subtle and frustrating task that is generally believed to be who have not actually attempted it. Questionnaire is structured set of questions usually sent by the mail, though sometimes it is delivered by hands also. Questionnaire is described as a document that contains a set of questions, the answers to which are to be provided personally by the respondent. It is a systematic way of asking questions under scientific control. A questionnaire is a device in which respondents fills in their responses in a specified manner personally. Let us take a look at some of the important definitions of questionnaire. Some of the important definitions of questionnaire are as follows. Goody and Haight defined questionnaire as a device for securing answers to questions using a form which the respondent fills in himself. Earl Baby defines questionnaire as a document containing questions and other types of items designed to solicit information appropriate to analysis. Similarly, Wells and Wells have defined questionnaire as a means of gathering information by having the respondents fill in answers to printed questions. Professor Lundberg defines questionnaire as the questionnaire is a set of stimuli to which illiterate people are exposed in order to observe their verbal behavior under these stimuli. In order to understand the concept of questionnaire, a distinction between a questionnaire and a schedule and interview guide, which are frequently used as a tools for social exploration, should be clearly understood at the outset. A questionnaire is a tool or device for securing answers to the set of questions by respondents or informants who fills the form of questionnaire himself. Generally, the questionnaire is dispatched through the mail to the informant who have to give answers in a manner specified in covering letter or the main questionnaire itself. The sender or the researcher does not assist the informant at all in filling the form of questionnaire. However, a schedule, on the other hand, refers to a form of questionnaires which is generally filled by the enumerator or the researcher or the interviewer himself. He sits with the informant face to face, which is generally fitted in by the enumerator or the researcher and the assist when necessary in the interpretation of question and in the other aspects. Thus, there is sufficient room of flexibility in it. In fact, the difference between questionnaire and a schedule lies in the method of filling the form contains a set of questions. A questionnaire is self-administered, whereas schedule is not. An interview guide refers to the set of points, topics, matters which must be duly covered by the interviewer while conducting the interview. Such interview guide serves a very helpful purpose for the interviewer as it helps him in covering all aspects of investigation for which he may be carrying on the interview. Sometimes the questionnaire or schedule itself may be used as an interview guide. Now let us take a look at the types of questionnaire. Questionnaires can be classified into two broad types. Number one, structured questionnaire. Number two, unstructured questionnaire, and also sometimes as quasi-structured questionnaire. Structured questionnaires are those which pose definite, concrete, and preordained questions to the respondents. It is prepared in advance and not set at the time when the questions are being posed before the respondent. On it, sometimes additional questions may be framed and asked when some clarification is needed or some more information may be sought from the respondent. There are certain questions which are automatically structured because of their nature. For instance, questions regarding age, marital status, nationality are automatically structured. Structured questionnaires include pre-coded questions with well-defined skipping patterns to follow the sequence of questions. Most of the quantitative data collection operations use structured questionnaire. Advantages of such structured questionnaires are there is less discrepancies, easy to administer, consistency in answers, and easy for the data management. Now, unstructured questionnaires. The unstructured questionnaires refers to those set of questions which are not structured in an advanced and which may be adjusted according to the need of the time of questioning. It gives sufficient freedom for variety of responses. Such questions is used mainly for the purpose of the interview. However, it also aims at precision and contains definite subject matter. Its chief merits lies in its flexibility. It requires free responses from the subjects. It is used for intensive studies but generally for a limited number of cases. It however suffers from a serious limitation that is that it may result in the collection of non-additive, non-comparable data which may pose difficulties at the time of tabulation and analysis. Unstructured questionnaires include open-ended and vague opinion typed questions. Maybe questions are not in the format of interrogative sentences and moderator or the enumerator has to elaborate the sense of questions. Focus group discussions use such questionnaires. Now, the quasi-structured questionnaires. Not all questions are easily pre-coded with almost possible alternatives of answers. Given answers, alternatives of some questions in standard questionnaires are left as others. A common and a pragmatic practice is that most of the questions are structured. However, it is comfortable to have some unstructured questionnaires whose answers are not feasible to enumerate completely. Such a type of questionnaires is called quasi-structured questionnaires. Questions in a questionnaire vary with respect to number of criteria. We will briefly describe each one of them separately. Number 1. Close-ended or open-ended questions. On the basis of responses, questions are classified as open-ended or close-ended questions. They ask the respondent to choose among the possible set of answers the responses that most closely represent his or her viewpoint. The respondent is usually asked to tick or circle the chosen answer. Questions of this kind may offer simple alternatives such as yes or no. They may also require that the respondent chooses among several answer categories or that he or she uses a frequency scale, an importance scale, or an agreement scale. For example, how often do your parents ask you about your homework? Please circle one answer only. And the options may be given never, 1 or 2 times a week, 3 or 4 times a week, nearly every day. Now let us move to the open-ended questions. They are also known as free response questions, are not followed by any choice, and the respondent must answer by supplying a response, usually by entering a number, a word, or a short text. Answers are recorded in full, either by interviewer or, in the case of self-administered survey, the respondent records his or her own entire response. For example, what are your favorite TV programs? Please specify the titles. This is an open-ended question. The respondent have the choice. Other question may be, what do you like most about schools? Now, the other category of questions. On the basis of nature of information elicited, questions may be classified as primary, secondary, or tertiary. Primary questions elicit the information directly related to the research topic. Each question provides information about a specific aspect of topic. For example, for determining the type of family is a primary question. Secondary questions elicit the information which do not relate directly to the research topic. That is, the information is of secondary importance. For example, the question, who finally selects the boy with whom the girl is to be married, are secondary questions. Tertiary questions are of neither primary nor of secondary importance. They only establish a framework that allows convenient data collection and sufficient information about exhausting or biasing the respondent. Now, most important, that is the formulation or construction of a questionnaire. Construction or framing a questionnaire is not an easy task, and so far no universal or standard practices have been evolved in this respect. That is not feasible also, as the requirements of each survey depends upon the nature of survey, and the problems also may differ from one subject to another. It is only experience, common sense, and general principles which may be of some use or guide in this respect. Even though no standard practice or format has been evolved in respect to formulation of questionnaire, but the process goes through a number of interrelated steps. The following steps should be followed when designing a questionnaire. Number 1, the formulation of the research questions and research objectives or goals. That is, what do you wish to ascertain? Number 1, provide a clear, concise formulation of the research question or questions. That is, what do you wish to ascertain and why? Number 2, specify clear and unambiguous goals for the intended study. Number 2, define the target population. Who do you wish to target? Provide a clear, concise, unambiguous formulation of who the target population is. That is, who is intended to study is aimed at. Number 2, a clear description of the target population allows the researcher to ask relevant background questions and to formulate the questions in such a way that it is understood by the respondent. Next step, formulate the questions in order to answer the researcher's questions. In this, number 1, list all the information needed to be able to answer all the research questions. Number 2, scrutinize the existing body of knowledge. For example, available questionnaires or articles regarding similar studies in order to select questions that are relevant for your purpose. Adapt and refine the available questions. Formulate your own questions where necessary. Decide on the appropriate level of measurement for each question. Determine the appropriate statistical techniques to be used. Next step, organize the questions. In it, number 1, questions should be organized in logical order. For example, background questions in the same section, opinion related questions dealing with the same topic in a separate section, and etc. Number 2, it is often a good idea to start with questions that is non-threatening yet interesting to be respondent. Next step, consult experts once you have first drafted the questionnaire. Number 1, consult expert in the specific field of study to ascertain their opinions, whether you have addressed all relevant issues and formulated the questions in an understandable and unambiguous way. Consult an expert in questionnaire design to assist with the formulation of the questions and the response format. Next step, do a pretest or a pilot study among a small group of respondents similar to those in the target population. In it, a pilot study is imperative in any study since it enables the researcher to identify and rectify problems prior to the survey being conducted. Provide an indication of the response rate that can be expected. Next step, adhere to the ethical standards. The rights of the respondent as human beings should be respected all the time. This implies that the decision to be taken on part in a survey by completing the questionnaire remains the choice of the respondent. A respondent should be given the option to withdraw from the study at any time. A respondent cannot be coerced into providing information, especially not information that may be perceived as sensitive or incriminating. Respondents should be given an assurance that their responses will remain anonymous and that the information they provide will be treated as confidential all the times. Now, most important, that is the language of the questions. The language used in the questionnaire is the most important part of the questionnaire construction. The respondents should feel comfortable with the language used in the questionnaire. Questionnaire language should be non-threatening to the respondent. The investigators should be familiar with the vocabulary of the respondents, not only in quantitative but also in qualitative researches. It is suggested that before pretesting, a team of investigators visit to the sample area, understand their subject. Some rules of questionnaire crafting are presented as following. Number 1, the question should be short, simple, and to the point. This implies, amongst others, the double-barreled questions, that is, single question addressing more than one issue should be avoided. The questions should be clear and unambiguous. There should be no room for misunderstanding on the part of respondent as to the meaning of the questions. The researcher should also understand the answer in the way meant by the respondent. The questions should not contain double negatives. That is, this occurs when the respondents are asked whether they agree or disagree with a negative statement. If they disagree with the statement, they are expressing a double negative because they disagree with not doing or believing something. Respondents should be asked to express opinions about their own views, not what they think somebody else thinks. In this, researchers sometimes draw conclusions about the views of the respondents when they were asked to express an opinion about someone else's views. This only results in unreliable and incorrect information. Therefore, Conclusions cannot be drawn about other people's views on the basis of what a respondent believes these views are. Next, the questions should be phrased neutrally, that is, questions that contain value judgments or give respondents an indication of what the sociably desired answer is are called leading questions. These should be avoided as respondents have a tendency to give researcher the answers they think the researcher expects. The questions should not contain emotional language. One should avoid using words with emotional connotations when formulating a question, as respondents would tend to react to the emotional connotations rather than the issue. The questions should not make the respondent feel guilty. That is, if respondents feel that they are implicating themselves by answering a question truthfully, they will tend to lie. The questions should not have prestige bias. If a particular opinion is linked to a person with high status in a community, it influences the respondent's reply. If respondents respect the high status person, they will tend to assume that he or she might be right and will reply accordingly. Also, the question should not make assumptions. A question should not begin with a premise and then ask questions based on the premise. Also, the questions should not ask about hypothetical situations. Respondents tend to answer explicit, tangible questions about topics that relate to their experience, much more reliable than abstract hypothetical questions. The latter type of questions expects of respondents to consider what they would do or think should they find themselves in an hypothetical situations. The majority of respondents find very difficult to do so. Now let us move to the advantages and limitations of questionnaire. Questionnaires as a tool of data collection have strengths and weaknesses and thus advantages and disadvantages. Some of the advantages of questionnaire are listed as: questionnaires are less expensive than other methods. Even the staff required is not as either as the researcher himself may mail, or one or two investigators may be appointed for hand distributing the questionnaires. Questionnaires are time saving than other methods since the respondents may be geographically dispersed and the size may be very large. The time required for getting back the questionnaire may be little greater but usually less than that for face-to-face interviews. Accessibility to widespread respondents. When the respondents are separated geographically, they can be reached by correspondence, which saves travel costs. Questionnaires can be used to explore potentially embracing areas such as sexual or criminal matters more easily than other methods. The questionnaire can, for example, be both anonymous and completed in privacy. This increases the chance of people to answer the questions honestly because they are not intimidated by the presence of the researcher. A questionnaire is easy to standardize. For example, every respondent is asked the same question in the same way. The researcher therefore can be sure that everyone in the sample answers exactly the same question, which makes this a very reliable method of research. Questionnaires are relatively quick and easy to create, code, and interpret, especially if close ended questions are used. In addition to the respondent, not the researcher, does the time consuming part of the completing the questionnaire. Questionnaires are stable, consistent, uniform measures without variations. Now, let us learn about some of the limitations of questionnaires. Some of the limitations of questionnaire are listed as: the mailed questionnaires can be used only for educated peoples. This restricts the number of respondents. The format of the questionnaire design makes it difficult for the researcher to examine complex issues and opinions. Even where open ended questions are used, the depth of the answers that the respondent can provide tend to be more limited than with almost any other method of research. This makes it difficult for the researcher to gather information that is rich in depth and detail. Where the researcher is not present, it is always difficult to know whether or not a respondent has understood question properly. With a mailed questionnaire, the researcher can never be certain the person to whom the questionnaire is sent actually fills it in. For example, if your research is concerned with finding out the opinions of women on a range of issues, it will be less than useful if an unknown number of questionnaires sent by the researcher were filled in by men. The response rate, that is, the number of the questionnaire that are actually returned to the researcher, tends to be very low for mailed questionnaires. A 20 to 25% of return of questionnaires is probably something that most researchers would happily settle for, and this may mean that a carefully designed sample becomes unrepresentative of a target population. The problem of the self-selecting sample is particularly apparent in relation to questionnaire. When a response rate is very low, the responses received may only be the opinions or of very highly motivated section of sample, that is, peoples with strong opinions who take the time and trouble to complete and return a questionnaire. Questionnaires do not provide an opportunity to collect additional information while they are being completed. There is lack of depth or probing for a more specific answer. With this, dear students, we have completed our topic. Hope you have grasped the concept very clearly. Thank you.